Dumba Jumden de Java da Jumba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Riba da Javzo Demba Devara Jeba Jigden Kimba Jibun Dube Kalu Jurva Lana Meba Lada Menamje Dumba Sanje Jumden de Penjava Jaja Tuba La Chanze Lo Chudu Javzo Che Ho Dumba Jumden de Dijen Shewa Jajumba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Riba Da Javzo Demba Devara Sheba Jigden Jemba Jibun Dube Kalu Jurva Lana Meba Lada Menamje Dumba Sanje Jumden de Penjava Jaja Tuba La Chanze Lo Jodo Jazo Che Ho Dumba Jumden de Jen Sheba Tashumba Yandaba Zobe Sanje Rigba Dan Shabzo Temba Devara Sheba Jiden Jemba Jebu Debe Kalu Jurwa Lana Meba Lada Menamje Dumba Sanje Jumden de Bejawa Jaja Duba La Jaze Lo Jodo Jazo Che Ho Sanje Jodan Soje Chonama La Chanju Pado Tane Jazo Che Dagi Chushe Jebe Zonama Je Dola Penje Sanje Jobara Sho Sanje Jodan Soje Chonama La Jiangzhou Bado Tane Jiaozu Je Dage Chushin Jibe Sonama Je Dola Penje Sanje Dobara Sho Sanje Judan Zoje Shonama La Jiangzhou Bado Tane Jiaozu Je Dage Chushin Jibe Sonama Je Dola Penje Sanje Dobara Sho Good morning. Hope you are all well and enjoying the beginning of spring. When I look out, I see a sunny day. It looks like going to be a pleasant day today. Anyway, thank you for being here. So, where did we stop last time? It seemed so long ago. So anyway, let's try to get our mind back on the track. So I think until now we have discussed about the faults or the disadvantages of losing our cool and the benefits of practicing patience. We also looked at what gives rise to our anger. What is the fuel that first gives rise to it and then sustains our anger? And we covered that. We understand that it is that discomfort, that dissatisfaction from due to various reasons. So Shantideva says that we need to put down or extinguish that spark, or we need to cut off that fuel, that supply, so that we will put a final stop to the workings of anger and the ramifications it accompanies. So today we are going to look at other areas. So first we will look at what are the objects of our anger. So here we first identify the objects that are responsible or that plays a role in giving rise to anger within us. So Shantideva, this is a general identifying the general objects. So generally, according to Shantideva, there are 24 objects that give rise to anger or hatred. So here it says, Thagam thagi shenam la tunye nye da tsikzub tang minyin sheja mindu de tala tele doba wos. So we talk about here the main point is this 8 worldly concerns. Because of our preoccupation of these 8 worldly concerns, anger arises. So 8 worldly concerns that we all know of is a real culprit. First of all, because of 8 worldly concerns, the thought of practicing Dharma hardly occurs. Even when that occurs, when we decided to do some Dharma practice, some practice of virtue, virtuous practice, or we feel that we need to spend our life in a meaningful way, but then these 8 worldly concerns come in between our practices and contaminates whatever we consider as Dharma practice. So that's why Kadamba masters always emphasize so much on these worldly concerns. Remember, we discussed about the hermits or the retreat, those practitioners who are locked in their caves, in isolated place, doing years of retreat. Even for them, that worldly concern, especially that fame, praise, for some it becomes a problem. It becomes an issue. Because at the back of their mind, if we are not careful, at the back of our mind when we do or when we engage practices, there is this concern about what others are thinking about me. Are they saying that I am a great practitioner? Are they saying that I am a good retreater? So when these kinds of thoughts arises, and when we are unable to counter those worldly concerns, then whatever we do in the name of Dharma practice, it does not become Dharma practice. It becomes just a worldly endeavor. So that's why it is so important to first identify these worldly concerns. These worldly concerns can be very sneaky if we are very watchful. If we are not very watchful, it can seep in all kinds of forms without our realizing it. And then when we realize it, it was too late. That practice was already contaminated. So when it comes to anger, it is because of that. So here, Shantideva made it very easy for us to understand that he classified these objects into 2 categories. The one, Mindupa Chungyi, that means those undesirable things. When undesirable things happens to us, then we get angry. And another category is when obstacles come in between fulfilling our desire, wishes. When there are things or people or anything that impedes or that thoughts comes in between, hinders making it possible for us to achieve or obtain anything desirable. So he says, for myself and for my friends, I want no suffering, no disrespect, no harsh words, and nothing unpleasant. So this is what we desire. We desire 4 things for us, We desire 4 things for our loved ones, those those people in our inner circles, or those whom we label as our loved ones or friends. So, in other words, when these 8 worldly concerns there are things that we desire and there are things that we don't desire. We want to avoid. So this is our preoccupation. We feel happy when we gain pleasure, when we receive pleasure, when we have pleasure. That's why we pursue after pleasure. We feel unhappy when we encounter pain, when we experience pain. Then we feel happy when we have gains, when we achieve material gains, when we achieve profits, when we gain profits. We are unhappy when the loss occurs, when we lose something. We feel happy when someone prays in front of us. We feel unhappy when somebody criticizes us, say harsh words, insult us with harsh words. We feel happy when people talk about us, how famous we are. When we get famous, when we become famous, we feel unhappy when people do the opposite, when we become insignificant, when someone makes us insignificant. So this is our preoccupation. The real practitioner, they don't care. Remember we talked about those 4 things? Main concern is to practice. No matter whether we undergo pain and suffering, whether we are deprived of pleasure and joy, as long as one has the opportunity, as long as one is able to practice Dharma, they don't care. These other concerns become so unimportant, insignificant. Likewise, a real practitioner can become a beggar, may have to live on the streets, may become homeless. But if we are really after Dharma practice, we don't care that. We don't care what people say about us. Because we are begging for food, because we are rummaging into garbage bins, people will criticize us. People will say that, oh, he has gone crazy. Look at him now. But a real practitioner doesn't care whether they say that, oh, you are such a great being, or whether they say you are like a devil. You don't care about your fame, your status. So that's why when you are able to put these aside, pack them in a basket and put it aside, then the real Dharma practice comes. When we look back in history, or the life stories of those great masters, most of them, in the conventional sense, they look really, deviate from the norm. They appears to be abnormal in terms of what they do, what they say. They can be very straightforward. They can be very truthful, very honest. So which is, in the conventional world, not considered a good thing. You have to be right, politically right. So this is what we are preoccupied with. So when these things happen to us, these are the desirable ones. When these happen to us, we are happy. On the other side, pain, loss, blame, insignificant. When these happen to us, we are not happy. So the people or things that plays a role in inflicting pain, loss, hurling criticism, blames, making us insignificant. These are the people that we get angry at. That's one category. Then same thing, when anybody plays a role in inflicting pain and loss and all this to our loved ones, we get angry. Then when someone facilitates these 4 desirable things to our enemies, we get angry. And then on the other hand, undesirable things. So not in a way, in undesirable. When anybody or anything that hindered us in achieving this, pleasure, gain, praise, and fame, anybody hinder us in that, that person, that object becomes our object of anger. And same thing goes when this happens to our loved ones, our inner circle, to our inner circle. Whoever plays a role in impeding these to happen, we get angry. And then for our enemy, we want this to happen. These 4, we want our enemies to experience these 4. But somebody or anything that hinders from that to happen, that person or thing becomes our object of anger. So it becomes 12 sets. 2 sets of 12 things. Minduba chunyi dan doba chunyi. So going back to the one, for myself and for my friends, I want no suffering. That's the first one. Pain, pleasure and pain. Then no disrespect. So no disrespect. Here in Tibetan, we say the nyeba. Nyeba, it is explained as not so much about no disrespect. Nyeba, of course, nyeba literally means kind of a disrespect, belittle. But by means of belittling, they, what do you call, what is the word now? Today I'm struggling with words. They cause you loss in material gains using baseless accusations. So that's what it means, nyeba, in this context. Then no harsh words. Of course, the 2 sets. Criticism, praise and blame. And then words and nothing unpleasant. But for my enemies, it is the opposite. So we want all these 4 desirable things to happen to us, happen to our loved ones, and anything, anybody that obstructs that to happen, they become our enemy. They become the object of our anger. On the other hand, we wanted all these unpleasant things, undesirable things to happen to our enemies. But when somebody creates an obstruction from obstructions from that to happening, obstruction to those to happen, they become our enemy. So that's the one. So here we see the faults of these preoccupations, our obsession over these things. When we are obsessed on these things, these 4 things or 8 things, we are obsessed on having these desirable things. We are preoccupied in avoiding the other the sets. Then it gives rise to many opportunities and avenues for our anger to arise. When we are able to kind of say, oh, these are not important. If this happens, very good. If it doesn't happen, if it's okay. If we have that kind of attitude, then there is less likelihood of us being angry all the time. So this one you can examine. When you get angry, what is the underlying cause? Mostly it is that you are not having your way. You wanted something, but you are not, other person is objecting to it, or you are not getting your way. So all this comes, why we get angry is because we have this attitude that I'm entitled to pleasure alone. But that is completely the opposite of our existence. We are in cyclic existence. Pain and suffering is part of that. So if you have this attitude that I'm entitled to pleasure alone, I'm entitled to fame alone, I'm entitled to praise alone, I'm entitled to gain alone, imagine how much suffering, how much disappointment, how much frustration one can experience. And also good reputation or bad reputation. You have no control over that. If you invest so much on something that you have no control at all, it would be quite stupid, isn't it? Reputation, fame, all these involves controlling others' perception, others' belief of us. There's no way we can control others' view of us. There's no way we can, what is that? What is the word now? Culcate or indoctrinate, is it? Others to like us. We cannot force other people to like us. We are really at the mercy of others' perception and views when it comes to reputation, fame. So if we have this attitude that I am entitled to this, I must have these good reputations, it is really, really difficult. You have no control over it. Praise and all this depends on others' approval. So when we are so focused on this, then sometimes we lose our principle. Because you are trying to please others to get their support, get their approval, get their praise. Look at the current political situation. We see congressmen, we see senators making all kinds of remarks, statements, which are, what is the word? Making statements that are against their principle. We see that happening in American politics. This is all because you are trying to please others, but you get that approval at such a huge cost. I think you understand better if I use the example of this political situation. There are people over the years, senators and all this, people have lost kind of faith in them. Now that when they speak, when they open their mouths, you don't really believe that. They are like the prayer flags. The prayer flags, the movement of prayer flags depends on the way the wind is blowing. So if the political wind is here, yeah, they will just go towards this and this way. So there is no principle at all. You cannot stand your ground. And also when we have that kind of that attitude of entitlement, we will be so attached to our things. So if we want to practice patience, so this is basically directly it is identifying the objects of anger, but indirectly it is also showing or identifying the object of patience, because these are the people that we get angry at. So these are the people. These are the people whom we should practice tolerance. That's why they become object of our patience. So now we move on to another section. So this first we identify the object. So now, where is my Subhachawas? So now after identifying the objects, how do we go about practicing the patience towards these people? So first, so there are three main kind of headings. Tala nyaba chabala tawagaba. So you practice patience to those who cause us harm. Then those practice patience to those who cause harm to our loved ones. And then we try to practice patience to those who are kind to our enemies, who facilitate good things to our enemies. So the first is divided into two headings. Tu nyege bala sobar chawada, nyeba so tu bala sobar chawa wos. Tambo tu nyege bala sobar chawala sums. So now when it comes to the actual practice of patience, so it is divided into three types of patience, which we already discussed in our last class. So this one first begins with the patience of fortitude, certitude. Remember we talked about three types of patience. Here, the patience of accepting suffering, the patience of certitude about reality, the patience of disregarding harm done to you. So now we begin with the patience of accepting suffering. So before it talks about the actual way, it lays out the foundation, why we need to endure pain, why is there a need to tolerate suffering, patience enduring suffering. Why is it so necessary? It is so necessary because the causes of happiness sometimes occur, but the causes of happiness sometimes occur, but the causes of suffering are very many. First, we need to establish that we live in this existence, which nature is actually suffering. As long as we remain in samsara, in this cyclic existence, it is like sitting on needles. No matter how nice or what material the needles are made of, it could be made of gold and silver, but if you sit on it, it is subject to pain and suffering. So no matter how grand and how nice our existence looks, but it is still subject to suffering. So we need to first establish that. The reason why that is the case is that the causes of happiness sometimes occur because happiness and suffering do not arise from nothing. It requires causes and conditions. That also what is called concordant causes and conditions, causes that corresponds to the result. So if we want happiness, we need to cultivate the causes conditions that give rise to happiness, so which is virtue, the positive karma. Likewise, if we do not want to experience suffering, then we need to stop committing the causes and condition that give rise to suffering, so which is negative karma. But in our daily life, from this very life, from our own experience, we can tell that what is our inclination. Most of our time, in our 24 hours a day, how much do we spend on cultivating virtue? Most of the time, we may be, in neutral mind, or maybe not. From 24 hours, how many hours we sleep? Sleep also depends with what kind of thought we go to bed. Depending on that, whether our sleep becomes a virtue, non-virtue, neutral, it depends on what kind of mindset with what kind of mindset we go to bed. And during the daytime, how many hours do we really spend doing Dharma practices? Among those hours, the hours that we spend doing Dharma practices, how many hours or time do we really spend on Dharma? Even doing a one round mala of recitation, is that really a Dharma practice? Only we can tell. First of all, was there a pure motivation present? Was the motivation pure? Was the motivation free from worldly concerns? And the actual practice, how focused we are, how what was our concentration like? Of course, we are reciting something, we are saying prayers, but does our mind follow what we are reciting? Or was our mind wandering elsewhere? And worse, is it thinking something negative? It's not impossible. We may be chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, but here you may be thinking of that enemy and thinking of ways how to get even with that person. And then at the end, dedication. How often do we dedicate our prayers? Most importantly, how properly we dedicate our merits. For most of us, we dedicate for this life's goals and purposes. So from that just short practice, a short time of practice, we can tell that we don't cultivate that much virtue. But when it comes to committing negative action, our mind is constantly engulfed by these three poisons: attachment, anger or hatred, and then ignorance, and then sometimes jealousy, pride. So because of that, so we end up suffering most of the time. Physical suffering is one thing, but mental suffering is another thing. And just that slight disappointment, discomfort, that is also suffering. So that's why it's the causes of happiness sometimes are good, but the causes of sufferings are very many. Because of that, there are more likelihood that we suffer. There are more time than other that we suffer. There are more times, is it? Today, for some reason, I'm struggling with vocabulary. So anyway, the instances of suffering is much more compared to the instances of happiness. So because of that, we really need to know how to practice patience in terms of enduring difficulties without suffering and just enduring pain. It is something that does not serve purpose at all. Here it says that there is purpose when we endure suffering. Undergoing suffering is, if we are able to adopt a new perspective, then it says that there are benefits. Without suffering, there is no renunciation. Therefore, mind, you should stand firm. The Kadamba masters, they say that Kina mega tugna ka, Kina nyomu tunga pel, Tugna ngonsa lenyen ze, Tunye lame tujins. The Kadamba masters view suffering and pain as the blessings of one's guru. The reason is that when we experience so much happiness, they say that it is exhausting our good merits. It is exhausting all our good karma. So when we experience happiness, he says that kinamiga tunaga, we shouldn't be happy that we are having happiness. But he says we have to be joyful when we undergo suffering and pain. Because when we are happy, there is likelihood that all these 5 poisons, ignorance, attachment, hatred or anger, jealousy, pride, all these may arise. These may increase. It's true, isn't it? When something great thing happens, first thing is we want to celebrate. When we celebrate, what we do? We let loose. We will do all kinds of things that are not according to Dharma. We will intoxicate ourselves and then engage in all kinds of negative speech and physical action as well. And when we become successful, there is tendency that some people can become arrogant, conceited, pride. Our ego gets inflated. And then there's also likelihood that we become jealous of others. So that's why the Katamba masters, they are happy when they undergo pain and suffering. So this is very important. So since we are living in this kind of existence, we should really utilize this experience towards helping our journey, the spiritual journey, having in our spiritual journey. Of course, in the Dharma term, we said that taking adversaries into the path. So if we are able to take all these adversaries into the path, then it is like we are making lemonade. Remember, when the life gives you a lemon, make a lemonade. Make lemonade. Otherwise, we will, our suffering and pain will maximize, will amplify. And when we go through suffering, then we have this first-hand experience of suffering. And then our pride, our conceit. Remember some people, very arrogant people, when they are met with some misfortune, they suddenly become very humble. So these life challenges or adversities, sufferings, teaches us humility. And also it increases, enhances our empathy. When we see other people suffering, we can empathize with them because we ourselves have gone or underwent that experience. And then, because of all undergoing all these sufferings, we will be able to see the suffering nature of this samsara. And with that, we will be able to develop renunciation. We will see our existence as being in what do you call, in a in a living on those thorny, I don't know, on thorns or needles. So with that, we are able to develop renunciation. With renunciation, then we will be able to develop bodhicitta, compassion for others. Remember, in order to develop compassion, we need to understand the suffering nature of ourselves first. Without having even the slightest experience or understanding, experiential understanding of the suffering nature, there is no way we can develop real compassion for others. So therefore, mind, you should stand firm, so it won't be a worthless endeavor. It will serve a purpose. That's what Shantideva is saying. Tewe gyune rega ju, tunye gyune shindu mang, tunye mebar nijung me, tewe semkyo tembar nurse. I think we will discuss this later part. It will talk about more benefits of suffering. So today I thought that I will talk a little bit about, if the time permits, we still have 15-20 minutes, about dying well. Due to the recent incidents, I think it appears that people are now kind of, I won't say waking up, but people are kind of preparing. People want to know more, what to do, how to prepare for death. Because even though the topic of death and dying is kind of a taboo in many cultures, but it is an important topic. It is part of our life. His Holiness says that there are two ways to handle death. One is we don't talk about it. We just, try to avoid that. So that, of course, you cannot really avoid that. It will come. But you can avoid talking about it. Another one is you talk about that, you discuss about that, and then learn what to do. Prepare for that. There are two options. So we can clearly see that the first one is really unwise. So that's why in Buddhism, reflecting on death, being mindful of death, is one of the main topics, because there are so many benefits. Most important thing is that when we reflect on death, we will be able, it kind of forces us to prepare, because we know that this is not the end. Our bodies may be cremated or buried or whatever is the practice. But our consciousness still moves on to next life. So that next life, we have no choice. We cannot choose our destination. It is determined by whether we have done any Dharma practice or not. So when we keep reminding ourselves of the uncertainty, the death being certain, and then the time of death being uncertain, it propels us. It forces us to prepare, because we know that we are not here to live permanently. We know that we are like travelers. We have to move. So we will be more likely to prepare to move on, to travel on to our next destination, rather than focusing all of our energy for this short life. So dying well is completely dependent on living well. If we live well, it is most likely that we will die well. If we don't live well, then no matter whatever we do at the time of death, there is no real guarantee that we will die well. So, what does it mean to live well? We have covered whole Lamrim topics. We have covered many of the Bodhisattva practice, the Lojong texts. So the essence is this, which I have covered before. So in Lojong practices, these 5 powers are discussed. The 5 power, implementing the 5 powers while you are alive, and also at the time of death. So we will talk both of these 5 powers. So first is the power of propelling intention. So this is the lifetime practice. So what to do if we are to condense all our study, all our Dhamma knowledge, all that volumes of books into a summary, into a core practice. So this should be the one. So first, so this is comprised of 5 powers, 5 things that we should do. The first is the power of propelling intention. So we must always have this intention. Pembetop. This plays such an important role. Every day, every now and then during the daytime, we must set our mind. We must remind ourselves. We must generate this determination that I will never part from the practice of true bodhicittas, which we covered every morning. Think or meditate on compassion and bodhicitta, and then remember, because visual helps, and then transform that into a moon disk, and then meditate on emptiness, and then transform that into a Vajra. So you have this moon disk and that Vajra. These are the two, represents these 2 bodhicitta. So every morning we should do that. and make a strong determination that I will all the time practice to develop these two mindsets. So when we set up this kind of strong determination, then even if we are, not conscious of things, there will be some force there. If you have that strong one, even in dreams, certainly when you encounter something, so this thought will arise, oh, I have to practice. Oh, I have to practice compassion. I have to view things, the empty. So these two concepts will arise. And then we need to, not just making that determination is not enough. We need to work towards cultivating that. So power of acquaintance is meditating on them every now and then, thinking about the two bodhicittas. And then the power of Vaisits, in order for realize that the cultivation to be successful, we need to engage in all kinds of virtuous activities. We need to cultivate merits so that it can help us facilitate the increase or the development of the two bodhicitta. So that is called the power of Vaisits. So whatever practice you do with the intention to develop these two mindsets. If you commit any practice towards helping to develop these two bodhicittas, that is what is called the power of the white seed. And then we also need to engage in purification. At the moment, why it is so difficult for us to even think of the bodhicitta, let alone developing them, is because we lack merit, but we have so much negativities that we have accumulated over the countless lifetimes. That is causing us, that is hindering our progress. So on the one hand, we need to cultivate merits, but on the other hand, we also need to purify, exhaust all those negativities which are the obstruction in our development. So power of the white seed is cultivating eradication self-grasping. So all these negativities, engaging in purification, and then especially working at the root of these negativities, which is self-grasping. We need to sever that root. So working towards reducing or eradicating that self-grasping is what is called the power of eradication. And then finally, we have to make prayers all the time, making aspirational prayers after completion of each virtue, dedicating your merit towards developing these two bodhicittas. So if we live by these sets of rules or these 5 powers, if our life is governed by these 5 powers, then we can say with confidence that I have lived well. I have lived my life according to Dharma. So that's a gist of how to live well. So now When the time comes, when we are nearing, there is another practice. Of course, there is a power practice, but here this is different from the tantric power practice, transference, consciousness transference practice. This is Lojong Phowa, mind training Phowa. So here there are also the same 5 powers, but it's a bit different. So the first, the power of white seed. In this case, so when the time is nearing, destroying attachment to one's possessions by giving them away. So here the power of white seed involves reducing attachment. So that is disposing our possessions, because our possessions can become a source of attachment, can become an object of attachment. So we don't want to be attached to our things when we die. That's not good. Remember, at the time of death, the virtuous mindset is so important. If you have strong clinging mindset, it will bring up the negative karmas. We have both karmas, especially lots of negative karmas. But the one who is picking these two is the mindset at the time of death. If we are able to generate a virtuous mindset, then it picks up the positive karma, and which will result into a good rebirth. Whereas at the time of death, our mindset is non-virtue, then it brings up the negative karma, which will bring us to one of the lower realms. So that's why it is so important to ensure a virtuous mind at the time of death. So these can be a distraction. These can be an obstacle. These can be obstacles. If you are unable to dispose your material things, mind may get clung onto those things. So that's why the first practice is to dispose. So there are ways to dispose. If it is a money thing, you can make offerings to your guru, to sangha, or to give to needy people. I think I have told you, one of my Rinpoche friends, of course he passed away last year. When I was back in monastery, I think 3-4 years ago, so Rinpoche told me that he is now in the second phase of clearing his money. He said the first time he made quite a bit part of a chunk of his money to His Holiness. So now he says that he is only keeping enough money for him to last for, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 years. The rest, he says that he was making offering to His Holiness. And he told me that at that time, he has already made an appointment. He already has audience appointment with His Holiness. So that's what lamas do. That's what practitioners do. And then you all know Gengindun. So Gengindun, I think this must be his 3rd time or 4th time. Recently, when he celebrated his 100th birthday, that must be the, I don't know, 3rd time he is disposing his money. Remember, he sponsored those huge statues and also printed those prayer texts. All these are his money. Those were his money. And I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I think he went to India. That time, he already cleared whatever he has. So that's the practice. So that when the time comes, there's no reason for you to attach to these things. And also because you are doing all this to a good cause, so you cultivate merit, which will help you in your journey. When you leave all this behind, first of all, you don't know what is going to happen to all that wealth you have left behind. As I mentioned before, it can even be a cause of dispute between siblings and family members. And even if they use that in a virtuous way, you don't know how much that can help you. So it is always good to settle these things. So of course, this one also, of course, in today's world, conventional world, it is to have a clear will, so that you are very clear about, if you are unable to dispose before your time, then at least leave clear instruction what to do. So that comes under the power of white seed. And okay, maybe I will talk later. Then power of propelling intention. So this one, of course, the main is to always reminding yourself to remember the true bodhicittas, always to meditate, always to think about bodhicittas, not to be separated from these two minds. So here we are also making this resolve that even your journey after this, when you are going through Parto and the next life, making this intention, this strong determination, this resolve to remember this. This is so important. This is so important because when you are ill, when at the time of death, if you are in so much physical pain, you may need to be given what you call painkillers, morphine, for example. Then you may not be lucid. You may not have the ability to really consciously remember. But if you have been practicing this, if you have been generating this mindset every day, every now and then that imprint, that force carries over. Even if you are not that lucid, I think there is an effect. That helps. So that's why this is very important. So resolve not to become separated from bodhicitta while in death state, immediate state, and so on. Of course, if you are practicing Tantra, then you should, since you have been practicing the dissolution, the 8 stages of dissolution. So here also you make this intention, determination, to be able to recognize these stages of dissolution. Because why we practice this dissolution, this imagination? Because when we practice, when we are alive, these are not, when we are alive, these are not happening, but we are imagining, okay, now this happens. Okay, I see these internal signs. That means that, oh, it has dissolved, the earth has dissolved into water. Now I see that sign. So that means that, oh, this is, so you have to, when we are alive, we do this visualization. So that is to help us when this actually happens at the time of death. we will recognize them. Then it's okay, this is happening, this is happening. So now I have to be careful. I have to grab the opportunity when that clear light mind arises. I will focus, I will use that mind to meditate on emptiness or bodhicitta. So if you are practicing this, make strong determination that you will recognize this. You will identify the various stages. Then power of eradication. So here it involves more of engaging in these purification practices, doing those confession ceremony, ceremony or those practices, and then retaking the vows. So if you have received tantric initiations, and if you, let's say, you can receive initiation again, or do self-generation, so that you can renew your vows. So here, main practice is purification practices, engaging in the 30 names, what you call the purification practice of 35 Buddhas, and also Vajrasattva practice. So any kind of purification practice here. Then the power of prayer, making prayers to develop bodhicitta and ripen other suffering and negative upon oneself. So of course you are making prayers to develop the two minds, two bodhicittas. But since at the moment one is in that situation, one is really undergoing that suffering, that pain, so this is the best time to use this as a practice, as a Dharma practice. So this is where we do the Tonglen practice. Since you are already suffering, so why not? Why not do the practice of taking upon yourself the pains and sufferings of others? There may be many others who are having this thing. Okay? And then there may be many more in the future who may go through this. But instead, you take upon yourself and make prayers that they never have to go through such a pain and difficulty. So power of prayer here is mainly Tonglen. Of course, Tonglen has to be propelled by this bodhicitta mindset. Finally, power of acquaintance, dying with bodhicitta mindset by virtue of having always familiarized with bodhicitta. So you can see that dying with bodhicitta mindset, this has to come from always familiarizing with bodhicitta. So if you have not familiarized this, if you have not accustomed to this mindset, then it is hard, especially at the time of death when there is a lot of anxiety, fear, or you are so intoxicated. So that's why it is important to meditate, engage in these bodhicitta practices while we are able to do so. So when we do that, then there is this carry-over effect. Even at the time of death, when we are not that lucid, the effect, there will be a carry-over effect. So that's some suggestions. Of course, the most important thing is when we are in that state, that situation, it is so important to have the dying to have a virtuous mind. So there are several ways we can do that. One is create an atmosphere, environment. It is so pleasant that the person doesn't get what I call irritated or negative mindset. So the place looks nice and pleasant. So there is less reason for the person to get agitated or angry. And our practice is that we normally put holy images in front of the person who is sick and dying. Try to put holy images as many as possible so that the person can see it. But of course, it depends on the person's wish. If the person is not inclined to this, then when you put that, of course, it will cause them anger rather than give them peace of mind. That's one thing. The another way is play this chanting. Nowadays, technology is so advanced that we can get all kinds of prayers, recorded prayers. So just play them. And I think those of you who have tuned into His Holiness teachings, I think some months back, His Holiness made it very clear that, of course, it is good to look at the holy image of Buddha or whatever it is. But it says that for many people who has this strong connection with His Holiness, it says that it is better to keep a picture of His Holiness. Of course, if you have not established any spiritual relationship, then it may not be that effective. But for Tibetans, because most Tibetans have strong devotion and faith in His Holiness, so His Holiness advised that we should use His Holiness picture because they have seen His Holiness, met His Holiness. So it is easy to remember. And His Holiness is the emanation of Chenrezig, there's no doubt. So that's one suggestion, to have an image of His Holiness so that the person can see. So through these means, so the whole purpose, whole goal, main goal here is to create a peace, a virtuous mindset at the time of death. So that's why we normally don't allow the loved ones to cry. So whoever, of course the family member will be sad, but we try not to cry in front of the dying person, because that will distract the person and there is danger that the person will cling on to that person. So these are some suggestions that we can prepare, but most importantly, we need to practice these. Our life should be governed by these 5 powers. If we live by this power, these 5 powers, these 5 set of rules, we don't have to worry. Even if we are not eager or if we don't feel dreaded to die, at least we will have no regret. Remember, the top practitioner will be happy to die. The medium practitioner will not dread when the time comes. The least of the practitioner will at least have no regret. So we should really work hard to at least fit into one of these categories. If we are able to live by this set of rules, definitely we will be in one of these three categories. So that's all for today. Thank you. Let's do the dedication. Tagi jinye zawe gyawa de tenda jowa kunla kangben da kyawara jizun losan tawayi tembe nyingbo ringdo seje sho jambe bawe jedara kemba da kundu sambo tenyang dejindo deda kungi jesu talobch gyawa deda damje rabdo ngo duzo shebe gyawa damje ge ngowa ka jodo ngaba de tagi kewe tsawa ndigwen zangbo chuchi rabdo ngo waragis. Okay, thank you.